So Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Yes.
And so Pete,
Before we wait, so we don't get demonetized.
yeah, I don't. We'd have to get monetized first.
We have to.
That would be a whiplash.
You can't be demonetized unless you're monetized.
Yeah.
Yeah. LaCroix comes after us. They're like,
Exactly.
I said, what? With our can on the table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pete Rodriguez
Thank you, man.
has been working with me at Brand Nerd for probably a year and a half, 2 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Off and on. And
Crazy how it's come about, huh? Like sometimes I look back and I'm like,
mhm.
it's just like kind of a God thing. It was a God thing, I feel like, for sure. But, I think this has been one of the most easy flowing client relations. Like, I don't really think of you as a client. It's even weird saying that because I just from day one, I think it's always been just like, we're just a team. Like we just work together. It's not, there's no formality, which I think for us works. Like for our personalities, it's just kind of like, hey, I need you to do this, get it done. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not like, hi, Mitch,
Right. Yeah. Hope you're having a fantastic afternoon.
Yeah. It kind of, so.
Yeah, no, just here's what I need. Yeah. Which is kind of me in general. The I love you is implied always.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I don't
It's been about a year and a half of just working on projects and stuff. And now we're kind of like taking the next step in our relationship.
Yeah. So, Pete, I asked Pete to join the Brand Nerd team as the design director. And it doesn't mean he's going to stop doing what he does, which is awesome branding. So still reach out to Pete Design Co. But Brand Nerd is at a moment in time where we're trying to do a lot of different things, and we need people. I need people. And so Pete was one of the first people that I thought of when I was like, who do I want to work with and make it more official? So, hire people that are better at the things that they do than you are.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was like, Pete.
Yeah, it's cool because I can wear a lot of hats, and I've always sort of been that way. And I think that's been reflective of my work. Like I can be a lot of different types of, I can be the brand guy, I can do content, I can do a lot of different things. And so I say that to say, I've intentionally positioned myself in that way to be, to add value. And I think that's important. Like, I know we're going to get into branding and stuff, but it's important too, as an entrepreneur, as a creative, as somebody who's looking to make yourself marketable and attractive to someone like you or someone else who can bring you on a team or get hired or whatever your pursuit is, to make yourself, put yourself in a position where they're like, I have to bring this person on.
Right.
That's so valuable. And you've probably experienced that too. But even, it doesn't matter if you're working at an ice cream shop, Chipotle, whatever. It's make yourself unfireable, right? Especially add so much value that they can't even fathom letting you go. And
exactly.
That's always the goal.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, just how I met you was actually through LinkedIn. I
don't recall that. That's
okay,
funny.
I do. So what happened?
Shared that story, but
what happened was I initially connected with you because you were working at a local
vehicle wrap
company, signage company, and I knew some people that worked there, and I asked hey, who's you guys did a video actually that I really liked, and I know you're integral at doing that. It was a kind of a throwback, Better Call Saul-esque.
Yeah. It was why
video.
rap. And,
but you had the main character had slicked back hair. It was kind of like a greasy used car salesman.
That was one of my favorite ones. Yeah. Oh, Scott Garber.
Scott Garber. Yeah. He. So I know Scott from way back.
Crazy enough, he texted me this morning.
Oh, there you go.
So, super random, but yeah.
So anyways,
fantastic.
I asked him who was involved in that, and he told me about you, and I think I just connected with you on LinkedIn. Didn't just did the random hit the connect button. Didn't say anything. I didn't send
Good.
you a message.
You know what's worse than that? People on LinkedIn who just hit connect and then think they have the relational equity to like just shoot you a long DM about how they're like, hey, like I'd love to meet for coffee.
Oh
and
yeah, LinkedIn's the worst.
it's just so I'm just like, you don't even know me. You don't know anything about, like, just say hi first. Just say,
No.
hey, I just want to say hello. That's it. And then maybe a week from now, make a pitch. But like, anyway, I appreciate you just hitting connect and then leaving it there.
Right. Yeah. No, I just connected with you, and then it probably was a year or two, maybe even more. Like I know you weren't working there anymore, and you put out a video saying like it was like a LeBron James taking my talent to South Beach video, and you're sitting there with your Rode mic at a folding table or kitchen table or something.
I think it was like a cardboard box, actually.
Okay. And something about like, hey, I'm going freelance.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, I gotta send this guy a message.
So that was actually after I left my agency job. Yeah. So I was at the vehicle wrap place, and then I went to work as a senior designer at an agency. And then after that is when I made that video. And that's exactly what it was supposed to be. Like I'm taking my talents to South Beach, and like you get the reference. Some people didn't. Some people actually thought I said, hey, I'm taking my talents to Pete Design Co. Right. So like my own business. Yeah. But I had a guy message me because there's actually a apparel brand called Peak Design, PAK. Oh. And gotcha. I think they make like snowboarding, like outdoors type stuff. So he was like, oh, dude, I love Peak. And then I was like, oh, sorry, man. Like, that's not I wish I was going to work there, but I'm not. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I messaged you and was just like, hey, I just remember being like, I needed some design stuff. And also, whenever you see somebody, join the freelance pool, you just kind of go like, oh,
put them on your
saw
radar.
An opportunity. And so I reached out to you and said, hey, I need some design work. Here's how I know you.
That's great. And that was through LinkedIn.
Yeah. And so we worked together virtually. It was during the whole virtual world times. And so we worked together virtually for a while. And then, I bet we worked together for 6 to 8 months before we ever met in person. So, finally we...
Were you nervous when you, like, do you get nervous when you meet someone in person that you've... So to me, if we would have just met, no nerves. But the fact that we were like working together for like 6 months, and then only after that we're gonna like actually hang out or like get lunch or whatever. Oh, for some reason that makes me more nervous.
Interesting.
Or have more anxiety around
that
it.
didn't bother me. No, I don't. Typically, I don't mind meeting up with people. Of course, I was also like, I'm kind of in the driver's seat, so it doesn't. It's kind of like there's not anything on the line for me. Yeah. Like, hey, you want me to still keep sending you jobs and paying you money?
Right.
Like, I don't know.
No, man, I'm not interested.
Yeah, exactly.
Just walk out of the meeting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess, it didn't really bother me. But anyway, that's kind of how things got started. And then, it was a couple months ago where I was exploring different, what are the next steps for Brand Nerd? Like we've grown this agency to, I don't know if I want to say numbers, but a 6-figure agency multiple 6-figure agency. And so like, I was like, but like, there's more here and I'm doing too much, and I'm doing too much, not only like too much working on the business or in the business when I want to be working on the business, but also working on too many things, like constantly switching gears between, like copywriting and design and all, various marketing activities. And then on top of that, like customer service and we're responding to emails and all that stuff. It's a lot, when you have your own company and you're, originally a solopreneur. Now I have Devin and some other people working for me, yourself. It's still like not that glorious, or it's not like, hey, I'm the CEO of Brand Nerd. No, I might be the CEO, but I'm also the janitor. I'm also the bookkeeper, at least in my business. That's the way I've done it. As of late is when I run the books, I'm more aware of the numbers, so
Yeah.
it's better if I do that, because I'm pretty good at ignoring problems.
You paid your
So-
taxes like an
Right.
hour before they were due this year.
No, I paid them multiple hours before they're due.
Multiple hours. Exactly. Yeah.
Many much
I
hours.
saw you last week, and you were like, "Yeah, I paid my taxes just like a couple hours before."
Listen, they were
the
done.
deadline.
I like to
Live life on the edge.
feel it out right to the end. Yeah, and they went through. Knock on wood.
Yeah, the IRS just busts down through.
Yeah.
Takes you.
Yeah. Well,
Like
I
out
mean,
Yeah, it's pretty wild
Bring
to
it
think. There's a big jump from solopreneurship to entrepreneurship, and like just actually getting to the point where you can hire people. And
Mhm.
that's something I like. I can understand in the sense that I was able to like even within a year get Pete Design Go to a really good spot between a bunch of different stuff, and like so hiring out contractors, which is very different from hiring someone full time. Totally get that, but even that tension, there's a gap there where you're navigating like I could pay this dude $400, $300, $400, and then I got to keep 3/3 of it, and like you have to constantly navigate those decisions.
You're gonna keep 3/3 of it? That's
No.
selfish.
Not 3/3, 2/3, 2/3 of it. Math with an F. That's my math skills. But yeah, how do you like? I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead, but how do you navigate paying Devin, paying me, paying whoever, what other like subcontractors, and
Mhm.
how do you make those decisions? Because I think a lot of creatives they hold on to it, right? The temptation is always to keep the money.
Yeah.
And to do it yourself so you can keep more of it. But in fact, that could be the very thing that's stopping someone from growing because you lose all your capacity.
Yeah. I think I just take a long-term view of it, and I go, I want to invest in people to help me do things better,
Yeah.
So, when I hire somebody as a contractor, I know what I'm paying them and what my margins are, what I need them to do. That's, that's actually pretty easy. Hiring employees is actually where it gets a little interesting, because there's a time where you are certainly not making money, maybe even losing money, definitely losing like profit margin.
Yeah.
But the goal is that over time that, with employees, they, within 6 months or whatever, that they're actually making you money.
Yeah.
And so you can increase capacity, and it also allows me to work on higher value things, like I shouldn't be doing $20 an hour work.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be. I should be doing, $100 to $500 an hour work, ideally, which I'm still trying to figure out the $500 an hour work, but
Exactly.
yeah. But anyways, that's it sounds pretty basic, and it is pretty basic, but that's the fundamentals of the way I look at it. And it's just important to track profitability and cash flow.
Yeah.
I think knowing when the money's coming in and when it's going out is important.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine that would be difficult because I mean, even me being on like paternity leave, and you're generous to like pay me once or twice through that, and I was not doing anything for you, which is why now I'm like, yo, give me a hit list, give me a punch list, like what can I do?
Well, but that's something I just thoroughly believe in, generosity, and I also know you, and that's not going to be wasted. And I also know that, I know what it's like to be a freelancer and say, I'm going to take 2 weeks off work because I just had a kid. And, like it's not affordable to have a kid either, like,
Right.
so, those are big moments. So yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think people should come to me for business advice, but I also understand that there's always people that are coming up behind you, and there's always people you can help. So I'm banking on generosity and investing in people, and knowing that over time can pay off.
Yeah. No, it definitely did, man.
Yeah. And I've also worked enough jobs where I felt like I was undervalued and I had to ask for every raise, and I had to like that's
Not the worst asking for a raise.
oh, it's awful. Yeah. Yeah, especially when like they tell you like what you want to hear and then don't
Yeah.
don't follow through.
Oh, that's worse. Yeah.
Or they give, like I've had multiple jobs now where they've kind of given me like a projection, like here's where we see you in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. And
Never follow through. Yeah.
it's happened twice.
Usually when they say that up front, it's like, it's not quite a red flag. Sometimes a lot of people go through with it, but like I found that, it oftentimes will slip through the cracks.
If somebody is making a plan and you've seen them make plans before, nothing ever goes to plan. Don't believe them when they hand you a plan for your pay.
When they tell you you're going to be around the $100 an hour mark in a year.
Yeah.
Just say no. No, I'm not.
And I mean, to be completely honest, like I get, I want to be the type of business owner that when I tell a client, like this is going to be done on this date, that it's done on that date every time.
Yeah.
And I'm probably, I might be 80% if I'm being very generous to myself.
Yeah.
But I used to be significantly worse. I realized that I have a lot of optimism built into my timelines. Like I don't take into account bumps in the road.
Yeah.
I mean that's a very real thing that I run into from time to time is I make plans that don't come to pass.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's something you probably navigate a lot with timelines and navigating different clientele and each timeline for each one. And we've talked a lot about streamlining stuff for Brand Nerd, but it's challenging when you have multiple timelines going at once.
Mm-hmm.
So what is a brand?
Yeah. What is a brand? I mean, that's
what is a brand?
To frame it, you work on brands, visual identity particularly, but you also have good skills when it comes to messaging and just overall creativity and strategy, which is why I very much enjoy working with you, because I know when I bring you into a meeting, I'm not just saying, okay, this is the guy that's going to make it pretty. You're also going to be able to speak into other things.
I think that's the difference too. Like going back to what I said a little earlier, I think it's important to add more value and just not just be. I think a lot of designers who aspire to even freelance will just say like, oh, they view themselves as the person who makes things pretty, right? Or who dresses things up. And I think you have to kind of snap out of that a little bit and say like, all right, how do I add value to the same conversation, but in different ways outside of just brand? Like, so we had that client call this morning and we were able to talk about, hey, this is brand, but actually there's some organizational things happening at a bigger level that could be addressed that would actually still affect the brand, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. And so
brand is a buzzword, and I started a company called Brand Nerd, and it's funny, people come in expecting certain things and not the same things. It's because brand means different things to different people.
When in your experience, when someone says I'm looking for a brand, what do you think? Like, what's the main thing that you've heard people say they're looking for? Like, is it more visual? Is it more like messaging? And
in like just the general agency world, when you say branding, and granted, I did not start in the agency world, I did not work in the agency world, I just had the audacity to start an agency. But
it's been good.
The term branding typically is that kind of logo design, creating product design, digital product or physical product, whatever that might be. That's really where the branding piece comes in. And I don't fit the mold at all when it comes to that. So I come at it more from So being story brand certified for 5 years, as of this month, I am much more in the messaging side of
Mhm.
things, the words that you use to describe your products and services.
Even that name, story brand, right?
Right,
So there, the story brand framework is you have an existing product, an existing
right.
thing. We're gonna help you tell a story and a narrative to that thing. So the brand is the thing, the story is,
Yeah, that's one way to look at
you
it.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. I think so. So story brand, yeah, it's very much about how do you take the elements of story to create a message.
yeah,
Um, because the underlying principle is that people don't buy products and services until they hear or read words that compel them.
yeah,
You know, you don't typically buy something just off of a picture. You know,
yeah,
you want to know what this is.
yeah.
And typically you have a need or a pain or a problem that you have to fix. So um, I'd be interested to know before I get into my philosophy on brand.
And
I'd
yeah.
be, I'd be interested to know from your, experience and worldview. And I know you're a thoughtful person. So,
Mhm.
what is a brand?
What is a brand? Yeah, I I think you're spot on. There's probably it could be defined in a million different ways. When I hear brand, I actually think the first thing I think of is like, they would brand items back in the day, right? Like whether it was a cow or like like piece of
Hmm.
wood or something, you'd actually take this hot thing and impress your mark into it, and that was a brand. And so I don't know if there's any correlation to that, but as we were talking, I was like, man, where's that brand word come from? And it's like, it's got to be something there, right? To impress a mark
Oh,
upon
for sure.
something.
Yeah.
So I would say in the simplest answer is that your brand is not just your logo or visuals. It's a combination of what you do, which is perhaps less visual, at least not. I mean, you still do websites and stuff, so that's really
Sure.
visual. But you understand what I mean. It's the non-visual and the visual stuff working together to invoke a set of emotions within someone. So if when you see a logo, when you're driving down the street, you see Nike, you have a feeling. What is that? What is that feeling, right? And when you see McDonald's, right? Like I love fast food. I love Taco Bell. So when I see that logo, I'm like, dang, I can go for like a chalupa right now, right? Like it invokes hunger in me.
Right.
And so that feeling actually is brand, not the logo itself. The logo is a vessel. It's just a piece that helps you feel something. And so I would say, using that as an example, Taco Bell's language, their commercials, their messaging, all of those things work together to help me, the buyer, feel something. Brand, let me think, brand identity and brand strategy, right? So I think you've gotten a lot into the strategy aspect. You don't call it brand strategy, but a lot of what you do is brand strategy,
Sometimes. Yeah.
direction and stuff. So brand strategy to me is like a foundation of a house, and brand identity is the house itself. And so it would be really sucky to build a really beautiful house on a really crappy foundation, and vice versa. It would be really sucky to have this beautiful foundation that's really strong and then you build a shack on it.
Mm.
So it's, a lot of people will spend money on really good early on. Let's figure out who we are, what our mission is, what our values are. All that type of stuff to me is brand strategy. And you lay this beautiful foundation, and then when it comes to the visuals, they get cheap, or they want to like start cutting corners, and
Mm.
they won't hire someone like a professional. And so that's an example of someone who's building a shack on a beautiful foundation. The opposite is true, is that people spend all this money with designers and agencies
Yep.
to build this beautiful brand, and they have no idea who they are, and like they don't know what they're selling, and they don't know like the core issues happening, so their foundation is like not strong. And so both of those things working together, the foundation and the house, for the analogy, I guess, the brand strategy and the brand identity, create what I would call like a brand system that,
Mm.
you know, you could take the analogy super far, but
Yeah.
I would even think of the front door of the house, that's your logo,
Okay.
right? That's what gets people through the door. They walk through the door, and then all of a sudden, like, there's other aspects of the brand beyond that door.
Mm.
But that logo is that first thing that is the front door that you see.
Interesting.
And so those things are just, it's an experience, and everything should be kind of aligned. Everything should be succinct, and there shouldn't be things that are disconnected when you do it well. It should all have, dotted lines back to each other. And you see a lot of brands that do have a lot of disconnected things, and it becomes problematic as you grow. You might not feel those things right away, but as you grow, like as in life, you start to, when you have children, it's a reflection of some aspects of who you are, and you're like, man, I didn't even know I was carrying some of this stuff.
Sure.
Because now I'm a dad, and now it's exposed. Well, I think the same is true with branding. Like sometimes you didn't lay your foundation right, and you might not feel it now.
Yeah.
But down the road, you're starting to grow and expand, and now you have different locations, and now you're like, wait, we need to restructure some things because we didn't think about this.
Yep.
Not that you need to, right? Humble beginnings make for great endings. So you don't have to have all your ducks in a row, but I'm just saying that in an ideal world, when you're building a business, you would think, what would we brand nerd do if we had multiple offices, if we had a Tokyo office, a New York office, and that type of stuff.
Yeah, sometimes when you think of it in those terms, you get, when you expand your mind, you actually realize there are things that you can do now that aren't when you have the Tokyo office. So like it's a pretty common thing in business coaching. I've recently started doing some business coaching, being coached. And well, I guess it's been a little over a year now, but still like, and I've realized some of the things I'm learning are not uncommon practices, because I start to see the themes pop up in leadership podcasts and stuff. But one of the things that we learned about in the coaching that I've done is this, like, thinking about things 10 times bigger than what you're thinking about. So like, if brand nerd, let's say, a website, just to keep it super simple, a website's $10,000. I don't do a ton of $10,000 websites, but that's kind of the base. Like a pretty nice, simple website designed.
5-page.
Sure.
About.
Sure. Yeah. But what if that same company, you needed to do something 10 times bigger than that? You needed to do the 100 times version, or that company's like, hey, we want to look 100, down the road, we want to do this 10 times version of this. So we're now looking at a $100,000 website. Is there things from that $100,000 website that actually apply to right now that aren't actually $100,000 to execute? And then you actually look at the other way too, and you go, if we only had $1,000 to spend on this website, what would be the thing we had to do? We had to communicate. Like if we strip it down to its core, so you look at it through those two lenses, and in the same way, when you're building a product, you go, let's say I had to charge 1/10 of this. Is there a way that I could still deliver a product in this category profitably? And that helps you think really like aggressively on systematizing, or like what of this can be automated, or in today's world, hand it off to AI.
Yeah, exactly. So if we had to do a $1,000 website, how would we do it?
Right.
We would use Squarespace. It's a perfect time to intro our partner and sponsor for the podcast.
I'm pretty sure Squarespace would sponsor us, just judging on the fact that they sponsor everything. Should really reach out.
Our sponsor, Squarespace, today. Make sure you use code Mitch and Pete for 3% off.
You should probably name the podcast before we go to Squarespace.
We're not sponsored.
Yeah, so that's kind of, that falls under the strategy part of branding. So I've always looked at, well, I shouldn't say I've always looked at brand. The reason I called brand nerd, the reason it's brand nerd, it's because literally I kind of geek out over what makes a brand great. Like it kind of struck me that, like, why is Pepsi not okay to some people? You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about brown sugar water, with bubbles in it. Why on earth is that, like, that feeling to some people so instinctual.
Yeah.
It's a brand. They're Coke people, they're Coca-Cola people. Like
Right.
we know Pepsi is not okay. And in the same way, like, why is it that every single time Apple announces a new product, I have to tie my hands behind my back?
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
And in the same way, why is Harley Davidson, the Harley Davidson shield is one of the most recognizable logos across the world, not just
Crazy.
not
Not in
just
America.
in America, but you can go to Asia and that you'll see people walking around with that, Ferrari and all, these are brands. And what makes that so and also not what that makes those brands so great, but also how does that apply to your mom and pop shop, your brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Brick and Mortar.
Yeah, dude.
Mordor.
That would be a sick podcast name, dude.
Brick and Mortar.
Brick and Mortar, man.
Man, that would be a sick
Like
band name. Brick and Mortar, like a heavy metal band.
dude, that's so good. Brick and Mortar, son.
Just does like
Yo, that would be crazy if like it was just a review channel for all things Lord of the Rings, and it was just called
Brick and Mortar.
Brick and Mortar.
I was thinking more of like a
I just love that in any capacity.
like a heavy metal band that sings in Elvish or something.
Yes. Yeah, they speak in like orc. Hey guys, we're Brick and Mortar. We're here to...
They just sample stuff from like Peter Jackson's movies. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That's amazing. Brick and Mortar. You were saying about
Oh yeah, brand. So we call it a brand nerd because I just want to know, how does brand help every business?
Yeah.
And
what is it about all that they're doing and visual messaging, blah, 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 that's affecting the sales and making it so irresistible?
Yeah. And so brand, and why is it that like certain shoe companies are like, nowadays there's like, like Instagram can drive a no-name brand to like a huge company because they just like, they take their pictures in the right way and they promise to make people feel a certain way through their visual identity and through their words and messaging. And so, ultimately, like, this isn't an original thought, but like what I think brand is it is a promise or an expectation and then comparing that to the reality or the delivery. So if you can have a really great brand as the cheapest plumber in town. Yeah. But you better have really good prices. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like otherwise, if you advertise as the cheapest plumber in town and people feel like you're price gouging them, then your brand's going to be tarnished. The same goes for the opposite. Like you can have a very high-end plumbing business, where, hey, we do, we'll do your bathroom remodel with all the best.
Then Joe Schmo shows up with 3 teeth and he's like, "Hi."
Right. But but you don't get back to people, and your
service guys are terrible. They're walking
your invoice is handwritten or whatever. Yeah. And it just feels very like, oh man, I'm not getting what I felt like I was promised. So it's that expectation versus reality. And that's what allows that is very important to when you're messaging a brand. You want to make sure that you're being authentic and telling a story that's true about you, about your company, so that when people actually purchase from you and go through the whole process at the other side, they're feeling like you delivered on that. And that's how a brand happens, and that's how people tell their friends.
Right. I found actually, man, that like, excuse me, when I'm working with clients, they will already be doing premium stuff. They're already crushing it. They're already like doing the thing. And I often find that their brand doesn't reflect the excellence that they're already doing. Does that make sense? So I feel like that's like 90% of branding, like people working with clients like that. But then have you ever worked with the opposite, where you felt like you needed to match, like maybe a brand was actually more blue collar, right? And you actually needed to match their messaging to that, versus maybe they sounded more pristine, more premium, more
Yeah,
they'll end up?
That's a good
You
question.
know, almost like backwards versus like.
Nothing's like popping into my mind immediately, but I do think part of the reason you've experienced that is because that is like where you're positioned.
Yeah.
Is you create really great visual identity,
Right.
You know, and you share those on the interwebs, and people see that and they go, okay, if I want to take this up a notch, then I'm going to Pete. Yeah. But yeah, I have definitely worked with clients who are the more affordable option, and typically, if that's part of their value stack, it depends on what, you know. Typically, affordability is not like a huge selling point except for the wrong kind of client. You know, if you have a cheap product, you're going to get cheap clients, and that's not fun.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like those, if you're a cheap product, a lot of times you're probably not looking for a more competitive advantage when it comes to your agency. Yeah. You know, like you're not going, hey, you're going, how can I do this the cheapest possible way? So I've had a lot of calls with companies that are in there, but they don't usually become clients. Right. And the few that have become clients that are more of a value option, it's because they have some other really fantastic qualities and they just happen to be affordable. Maybe it's because their competition is just a more robust company with more overhead, and they're like, hey, we just have an equal, if not better product, but we're way more streamlined and we don't have a giant sales team, right, and we can put this out for a fraction of the cost, but it's just as powerful. So I've definitely had that happen. And I have some clients that I've worked with for a long time that would fall into that category.
I just spilled a little bit of LaCroix on your carpet. Man, it's a little splash. It's no biggie.
It's all good.
It's no biggie. We'll replace it. Everything. Got money in the bank. We'll just buy a new studio.
Cool. Glad
so
we got that on camera. You are going to replace the whole studio.
We joked about Squarespace being our sponsor, but we are sponsored by a podcast studio in Marietta, Pennsylvania.
That's true.
And that is our sponsor for the day.
Yeah. Well,
is there a name?
Yeah. It's
want to talk about that?
Brand Nerd Podcast Studio.
Beautiful.
Not trying to overdo it here.
The Brand Nerd Podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another service offering of Brand Nerd is a podcast studio space.
Yeah. You know what's cool though, is specifically about that, and we can, I didn't mean to jump the gun on that, but like, it's cool to me that you have the ability to purchase things. So if you desire to do a podcast, right? I wasn't even thinking, again, going back to, can you think 10 years, 10x or whatever, like you were saying, you say, hey, let's do a podcast, and your ability to essentially say, let's just not do a podcast. Let's get all that gear that we need for it, but let's also find a way to like make money. Right. Yeah. And I think people just don't have that. Like, they're not wired that way to say like, oh, I'll spend a bunch of money on gear. But to then say, all right, well, what if we rented that gear out and allowed people to do the same thing for 3 different price points? I mean, you had that, right? You had a landing page up for that within a couple days. Yeah. It seemed like, at least. I mean, to me, it was abrupt because you just sent it to me and you were like, hey, it's done. But but I think that speaks to you and your entrepreneurship, your ability to see things that other people can't see. I mean, you even Googled, podcast studios in our area, and there was none. Right. So yeah, I mean, there is another recording studio that comes up, but it's like a house and there's no website and there's one review from 4 years ago. So it is 5 stars. Yeah, so. Yeah. There's one review. It's 5 stars, and who knows who else is in that house with you? Okay, here at
a couple needles on the yard. Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? But I thought that was dope, man. I thought that you could package that together, in a short amount of time.
That's what Brand Nerd was from the start. Was I learned how to build websites, how to develop websites with a no-code tool called Webflow. And the reason I learned it is because I was working for a company as a marketing director, and they were pretty cheap, and they needed a nice website. Yeah. And so I was looking for platforms that I felt like I could actually handle. And I messed around with Squarespace and Wix, which were still around back then. I mean,
They
we're
were
talking,
trash back then.
they were bad.
Like
Yeah.
Squarespace now is like so
Way
much
better.
better.
Squarespace then was okay. It just wasn't nearly customizable enough for what I needed to do. And then on top of that, yeah. So, and then the other cool thing about Webflow is that it's actually coding as you build a website. So I had to learn about coding a little
Right,
bit
right.
and to understand what I was doing. But then
Would
I
you?
can actually export code. So for the things I was doing is I could work with, they had an in-house IT department that had some like development capabilities, but very much back end development. So I could do some like the front end stuff in Webflow, export the code, and then they could actually grab the code and use it in some of our in-house systems too. So I could kind of help help in that way. But anyways, I eventually started an agency. Well, I got StoryBrand certified and started building up a client list on the side from my job. And then one of the things that differentiated me from many of the StoryBrand people was a lot of them would come, they'd learn this messaging framework, but they only a handful of them could build websites.
Right.
And so I could actually turn,
Both.
yeah, I could help you message and churn out a website. And that, went from, I mean, I tripled my income
Wow.
in a year and a half,
Yeah.
which
That's
is
so
partially
cool.
because my job sucked.
Yeah. No, dude,
But-
I had the same experience. I mean, I was working as a senior designer at in a city, so like a urban area where you would think, you get, and it was a fair salary, but I just made the jump, and a year after that, I think doubled what I was making. And so I didn't triple, but that's a flex. but I doubled it, and like that was awesome.
Maybe I was just making,
and it goes to show too.
Because
Like
I've heard you've told me what you made, and it was about the same as well.
Okay, yeah.
I think I
So
just made less money than you.
maybe, yeah, that could be it too, for sure. I think it was a very fair salary what I was making there, but the ability to then just go and take a leap of faith and double that was like, whoa. So now I'm on a journey, and a full second year of being on my own, that I'm like, how do I make that the same amount? I'd be okay making the same amount, but I don't necessarily need to make more. I obviously would love to make more, but if I can make the same amount and still, do content and do other things, that's part of what we haven't talked about too, is the tension that we're both feeling between the desire to do business and to pursue clients and all that kind of stuff and all the things that pay the bills and that we love, but also this content, developing content, creating content. I will not call you a content creator because you probably cringe at that.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yep, I assumed so. But
I prefer the term influencer.
Yeah. It's crazy. Scott Garber, look, just text me.
Dude.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
We were just talking about him. I say all that to say,
Nobody texted me.
No. Mitch, for those just listening, Mitch just looked at his watch. We're both Apple sheep.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I think there's So
it's a beautiful walled garden.
We
I
are
love it in here.
We are we don't have to get into too many topics, but going back to how we met, we had a lot in common, And I think that was one of the things that drew me to you, is just like you would say something and I'd be like, dude, like that's how I feel, you know what I mean? And like you'd mention Lord of the Rings. I'm like, yo, I love Lord of the Rings. You mentioned Star Wars. I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
Apple, you were like, yeah. I think that was one of the things we found out. We had both got the new phone and the new computer.
Yeah. That was, I remember that, like shortly after working together was like a month where Apple released like a bunch of stuff. And you were like, I bought all this stuff, and I was like, I bought all that stuff plus one more thing.
Yeah, dude, that's
and you were like, oh, good, I don't feel as bad.
Yeah, it was the new M1 Pros, MacBook Pros, and we were just like, oh yeah, it was a little bit of a tighter month because we both spent like $4 or $5 grand or whatever. Yeah. So anyway, going back to content, maybe speak to that. How do you?
Yeah.
Brand Nerd has done story brand stuff, messaging, creating websites, all that good stuff. But then now, where do you kind of see it going as it relates to content?
So that's a good question. I think over the years, I've had people reach out to me and they're like, I followed you for a while. And I'm like, followed what?
I put nothing out,
I
dude.
put almost nothing out, but like for whatever reason, like they tag, we're pretty good at ranking for search. So like that maybe they just like kept checking back on the website and like, yeah, we put out some YouTube videos here and there, I guess.
Right.
And usually it features me. And so maybe they just,
Yeah.
like I remember like people be, like they jump on a Zoom call and they be like, "Hey, that's your office from the video," and I'm like, like I've done like one video in this office, and like even back then I was like, I really should be doing content, but you're so like busy, and honestly, you get imposter syndrome or what do I have to say, all that stuff, but I really want to do it. Like I enjoy putting out content, and I hate the word content, but
that was
content a gazillion times.
content. That was my journey too. Is just heavy focused on branding, design, and then just really realizing like, man, I have these different skill sets, communication. I've taught in front of big groups of people, like in church environments and stuff, like hundreds of people, public speaking, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, how does all this come together? And so right now that looks like content, that looks like YouTube, that looks like Instagram, that looks like TikTok, and just teaching short form in some capacity.
Yeah.
And sharing what knowledge you do have. I think that's the most dangerous thing is that I've heard someone describe it like the difference between because you mentioned imposter syndrome, the difference between a flowing river versus like a lake, for example, right? And maybe the lake is the wrong analogy, but a river is consistently releasing raw water in one direction and receiving water from another, right? It's a flow, and the same water is never there. It's always moving, versus like a lake. Yeah, versus a lake that's like it just receives water and then that's it. And every once in a while it rains, but then it just dissipates and nothing happens to it. And what happens? You see algae, you see all that stuff growing on top. So the idea is with our knowledge, be more like a river, right? Release knowledge to other people, and then you're gonna get more knowledge. Like it's gonna keep coming.
Yeah.
And the more you have open hands with it, the more you let it go, the more you can receive, rather than just retaining. And so for Brand Nerd, you guys you built a multiple six-figure business in your 20s, right? You're a little in your 30s. Okay. In your 30s. So you have a lot to, like, people would love to know that. There's people working at a factory with a dream right now who are like, how the heck can I do that?
Yeah.
But you could literally sit there and go to bed at night and be like, I have nothing to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about how crazy that is.
Yeah.
You could literally convince yourself that you have nothing valuable to say, or who would want to listen to something. And then you're like, wait, here's what I did. And it's not to pat yourself on the back, but it's to honor where you've been.
Yeah. I think the thing that gets in my way isn't that I have nothing to say. It's that I know somebody else is going to say it better. And that's what and that's so, and like, this is my internal dialogue. Like I say, you hear that and you kind of go like, yeah, that's true. Like like everything I'm saying, I learned somewhere else for the most part. Like there's a couple original ideas, or like taking two ideas and merging them that happen from time to time. But the reality is everybody, even just because somebody could get that same information somewhere else, they might not.
Right.
Right. And what if you are not putting that out and that person never gets that information, even if you're not the best source for it? So or maybe the way you talk about it helps them more than what you heard and helped you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like this is all going on in my own head, like me arguing with myself, which is a pretty common occurrence. But yeah, I mean, the way I've done business, going back to the website, learning to build a website and then selling that, learning StoryBrand. And I'd used StoryBrand for years before I got certified. So I felt like I got a little bit of a head start into that too. Mm-hmm. And then selling that, and over time, learning about search engine optimization, selling that, learning about, email marketing, selling that, learning about, so this to me is a natural iteration to go, well, if I'm going to start recording a podcast, why would I not also sell that? Plus, for the first time ever, this is something I can do locally, which is kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I've mostly worked nationally, like
Yeah.
people find me online.
Yep.
And so I have a couple local clients that were like referrals, or, maybe they found me
Yeah.
because of Story Brand and they just wanted somebody local. But to me, the fun thing is like, man, if I could get like a bunch of people locally then to walk in and
Right.
record a podcast, like the way we have it set up is somebody can literally walk in, sit down, start talking, and when they leave, we can either hand them, I guess we don't hand them a file. I don't have like a stockpile of flash drives around here, but we'll literally be like, hey, we'll email you the link to your file in the next hour or two.
Right.
And then you post it. Or if you want,
Further services.
the extra, if you want us to go the extra mile, we can distribute it to your platforms. But to me, that is really exciting. And I want to do this. You hear people all the time say like, we should do a podcast, and if they're willing to pay for the experience, to come in and have professional microphones, professional cameras, professional recording equipment, and professionals overseeing it,
right.
then they are going to get a really cool end result.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we're going to learn how to
do that,
create this content and put it out on a consistent basis, and then share the knowledge. Essentially, again, we're gonna do it and then we're gonna sell it.
Yeah.
So you can say, hey, how did you grow your podcast? Well, this is exactly how we did it. Right. And
we've talked.
All you have to do is walk in and we'll do it for you.
Yeah, we've talked about just about growing podcasts and stuff and content, and how just the models that are out there of long form content, breaking that down to smaller, breaking that down to even smaller, to short form videos and stuff. And I think that's something that like people are finally catching on to. But to your point, there are a lot of people, there are millions of podcasts, probably, I would think, like at least 1 million, right? How many things
more than that
in the world? But yeah, you could say something the right way at the right time that could make a difference in someone's life. And everyone needs something different. Everyone needs a different voice, right? Yep. Like sometimes like your kids, probably you have 3 and you can probably say something, or your wife might say something, and you say the same thing and it's effective when you say it or when she says it, and they just need a different.
I don't even usually have to say anything.
You just give them a look.
I just poke my head in over her. If they're staring her down, I just make sure I catch their gaze and be like, hey, I'm here too.
Yeah, I heard.
I got boys, so they're like,
I get it.
Alpha dogs and thing.
Yeah, they need to know. No, I get it. That's so relatable. I only have, obviously our second is a newborn, so he doesn't need any reprimanding yet. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting, is that just again, being able to morph, being able to pivot. Oh, pivot. That was such a 2020 word, right?
Oh, I'm all about the pivot. The
pivot was such
digital transformation.
Yeah, pivot was such a 2020 word. Like, hey, we're gonna pivot to do something new. But your ability to do that, I would love to see. I think it would be really, really cool. A sweet spot would be Brand Nerd, and I'm just kind of prophesying this right now, okay? But Brand Nerd, like taking on exclusive clientele, not exclusive in a bad way, or like they have to be crazy buku bucks, but just like people that you're just like, I just want to work with 5 clients, and then you are selling your expertise in talks, public speaking to some extent, courses, whatever it is. That's one avenue. So you have 2 revenue streams right there, and then and YouTube maybe could fall under that. And then the last one is just like, I guess YouTube would probably fall under this, which would be content. It's just a steady flow of everything you're already doing. So you're gonna go do a talk, sweet. Devin pops up a camera somewhere by the stage, and now he has an hour and a half of you talking, and he splices that up, and that's your content. And so you're generating content on social, you're generating content through people, aspiring and to connect with you and hear from you. And then you have your kind of select group of clientele that keeps you fresh, keeps you learning, keeps you growing. I feel like that that evolution of Brand Nerd, it could be all those things,
Yeah, I think it could be that. I mean, I think one of the things I'm super fascinated by is this AI revolution that's coming for. I think
that's here.
well, yeah, that's coming for jobs.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, but it's coming for creativity and coding in a way that I didn't expect so soon. And the thing that I'm excited about is I feel like I have a pretty clear vision and understanding of how it can be used for content marketing in particular. I don't have a very clear understanding or vision of how it could be used in some of the other applications people talk about. Like I've heard,
Art, like generating cool art.
So far the art hasn't been that great for me, but that's also not my style. Like I'm not like like everything looks like it's like from like Tron or something. And it's
I follow a few Bible AI accounts, and it's like
interesting.
It's like here's what
I actually just thought about that the other day. Like,
really?
can you like what would chatgpt, like if you started like asking chatgpt questions about the Bible, does it do pretty well with it?
Well, I don't know if it, I mean, I'm sure it does decently, but what these people use it for is artwork. So they'll say like, what does the beasts or like the creature look like from Daniel 7? And then so it'll generate like an art of like what it theoretically could look like, or like what does the angels look like in Revelation, and then they'll just do crazy angels or whatever.
Interesting. No, I was thinking about it, and this scares the
daylights
out. What's the word? The idea of somebody using ChatGPT to like as like a shortcut for their sermon, because like you see it on like blog posts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like that's one of the things I've experimented with is like writing blog posts using ChatGPT, where essentially you like you ask it to write an outline, then you ask it to like then you kind of correct the outline, and then it's a really cool process of how you can kind of coach it along. And then at the end you've created something that's really what you wanted to create, but you didn't have to go through that like blank page syndrome and like crank out 2,000 words. When you can ask the robot to do it with your ideas. What just terrifies me though is the idea that like someone could be doing that for something like
especially
a sermon.
Like a sermon.
That feels so scary to me.
I've seen people like when it first came out and everyone on social was like just talking about ChatGPT. I remember seeing a couple like pastors and stuff playing around with it for sermons, just jokingly though. I don't think it was like their intention was actually to do it. And my understanding is that it writes a pretty good sermon.
I imagine it would.
And
that's
so,
the thing. Like I've worked with it enough to go like if you give it the right prompts and the right you kind of like it's almost like bumper bowling. Like you put up the right guide rails and say
you're gonna hit something.
Like you're gonna get down there and you're gonna hit most of the pins.
I think the only specifically to sermons, I mean, this could be actually that same kind of fear could apply to many different things, right? Like sharing heartfelt stories, or like just there's a lot of different things that you kind of want yourself to do and not an AI to do. But I think part of that processing
never let the truth get in the way of a good sermon illustration.
Exactly. But like part of that sermon journey and writing is the transformation that happens within yourself, because you think about let's say for example, here are two passages from the Bible I want to teach on, and then you sit with those. You marinate in them, and you kind of just like say, all right, what angle do I want to take? So and that's actually transformative to you. If an AI is doing that, you're going to get a point where you're just like,
what are you?
Like you're not being transformed either. And so,
but I feel the same way with that about like content. Like I've written some blog posts that like when I go back and read them, I'm like, I don't even remember this. So that's the same thing. But like, I think that's a very interesting use case. But I am very excited about what AI can mean for content creation.
You want to
particularly like the strategy part of it.
You want to talk about on future episodes at least, because we can probably at least tell people like, hey, all dozens of viewers. to the podcast. But we can essentially say that's one of your burdens. You've expressed that as to on future episodes unpack AI.
I like how you call it a burden. Like that's
Yeah. Well, it is. It's something that weighs on
You're
you.
always
You're
talking
like
about your burdens.
you want to say it.
I got some burdens. I'll tell you what.
I got some burdens too. But yeah, you've wanted to make this podcast not exclusively about AI, but like that's something you want to always keep at the forefront of the conversation because you feel like it's that important.
I mean, so selfishly, like, well,
It's a
selfishly
teaser
or whatever,
to future episodes for people.
Yeah, I've always been one of those people that kind of is looking like, what's the next thing, or like, I get excited about things. You know, I got excited about podcasting 10 or 12 years ago, probably longer than that, actually.
I wish you would have started then, because right now we'd be on a podcast with at least like a couple million subscribers on YouTube, a couple million listeners, and
you know,
then you could put me on.
I feel like, yeah, but you know, there's no guarantee that we would have met. In fact, we probably wouldn't have if I did that. So
that's true.
There we go. And honestly,
Friends.
well, yeah, that
the episode ends,
well,
the podcast episode, we just freeze frame.
Yeah.
Like in the 80s.
I couldn't have, like, I don't know that I could have handled it back then. You know, I'm mature enough to recognize that a younger version of myself might not have turned out very well if
it would
I
have
had
got canceled.
fame at a young age.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was canceled would have been the thing, but probably, other stuff.
Yeah. something. There would have been some positive, but yeah, man.
Sure.
I think
I could be completely incorrect, but it didn't happen. You know, that's a different timeline. On this timeline, I've
Earth 103 or whatever. Yeah. So maybe that's a good place to end, is to say, what do you envision this like? Not an intro to the podcast, but like what, you know, how do you see Brand Nerd and the podcast kind of working together, and then like, and how, like, why is AI a burden for you, or like something you really want to keep at the forefront of the podcast?
What I want this podcast to be is something that builds the Brand Nerd brand a little more, in the same way that our web presence, our website has, you know, established some of our brand, and people have, you know, our reputation gets spread through word of mouth and everything else. It's just it's another vehicle, but it also, for people who are willing to take some time to consume thoughtful content, then they can understand more about what makes me tick, what makes you tick, and anybody else that we want to bring on. I do have a burden, to use your words, for AI, and I do think that is something that's very important. In fact, I will plug brandnerd.ai.
Nice.
You can go there and sign up for our email list, and the first thing you get is actually a video and a prompt all around StoryBrand, and how ChatGPT is actually pretty freaking good at
writing
StoryBrand. I'd say it gets it about 80% of the way there.
Yeah.
You know, to use very round numbers, but you know, there's other things that I have a burden for too. Like I'm really fascinated at the way people build businesses. I'm very fascinated at first generation business owners in particular, like, because for me, you know, my family, you know, my dad doesn't have a business. My uncles and grandfather have a farm, but that's a very different kind of business. Like it's just, farming is just a whole different beast. So as far as like my immediate, like I don't have like a mentor person that I like grew up around, like, and then decided, like, you know, to say like, you should start your own business. It's just kind of like something that I wanted to do and then did.
You were the acting first generation.
Right. I'm a first generation business owner. So I like to think about that, but I'm also very fascinated by multi-generation business owners, and like businesses that are on their third, fourth generation, and like, and even talking to the first generation business owner in that multi-generation business. And like this idea, I have some clients that are pretty, you know, up there in experience, life experience. And, right. And I'm like constantly just like fascinated by their story, and it would be a shame if some of that wasn't captured somehow.
Yeah.
That like knowledge.
Yeah.
So like there's a number of things I want to look at, but I do think we'll be coming back to the AI stuff over and over again because it's something that is very fascinating to me.
Yeah. I think a segment would be cool. Like if each episode you just kind of like hashed out 15 minutes or something. Like here's our AI segment, and we're just going to talk all things AI.
Well, and like the YouTube channel will continue to put out some AI content that's separate from the podcast, because that's just something that I want to do. You know, and we might put out some podcasting content as well as we like learn stuff. Like I just set up, I have this Tascam Mixcast that, you know, if you like the way that these
the audio
vocals sound, then go ahead and leave a comment wherever you're at, and maybe I'll put out a video and show you how I set them up.
How it works, yeah. People are always asking me.
For the person who both found this podcast and is already an owner of the Tascam.
Exactly. I leave a comment saying like, "Hey man, that's so cool. Can you tell me more about it?" But nah, man, it's cool. I think I'm excited to jump in on some of the episodes, and I think it's a good move on your part. And like I said, kudos to you for having the ability to not just create a podcast, but to also find a way to monetize it in a way. I mean, we haven't yet, but you have the idea, you have it set up.
Looking at you, Squarespace.
Yep.
Or Webflow. I mean, Webflow. I mean, come on.
Webflow would be sick. Figma, all that stuff. But
we've been
even just setting up the studio is what I meant.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man.
Cool.
Good. Thanks for listening.
Right. Thanks for the podcast, Pete.
No doubt.
I'm sure you'll be on regularly,
yes. And we're excited for more episodes to come. Thank you for listening to the Brand Nerd Podcast.